what we had a discussion in the last class. Hey, hello, listen to me. So what we discussed in the last class, we discussed what we say, post-colonialism, right? We discussed on colonialism. We discussed post-colonialism. We also discussed decolonialism, isn't it? And in which we understood about the beginning of the colonialism during the period of 15th and 16th century, which discussed on how 15th and 16th century started with the what you can say that resources to maximize profits. Then we talk about 17th century where industrial revolution started. Then we understood about how the colonialism means operated on center periphery models. And after that, we talk about the colonies remained economically dependent on the center. After which we understood post-colonialism, post-colonialism, in which we understood what post-colonial refers to. We understood that post-colonial first appeared in historical discourse following World War II, right? Initially serving as a chronological marker indicating the degrading or decreasing of colonialism in the 1950s. And then we discussed types and models of colonization. Types and models of colonization means we talk about settler colonies. We talk about what is that? Invaded colonies. What is settler colonies and what is invaded colonies? Settler colonies, where we understood that colonies is settled permanently. Like we talk about Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, right? Whereas invaded colonies, we understood about India, Africa, the Caribbean. Then we talk about models of colonization, in which we understood British model, and the other one is called as a French model. So British model is an indirect rule, whereas French model is what? That called as an assimilation rule. Do you understand British rule and French rule? So then we talk about colonialism as a form of imperialism. Colonialism as a form of imperialism, and the main aim of the imperialism is what? That called as a geographical, also talk about political, and the third one is called as a economical or economic. Then we understood about how colonialism and its effects, and when we talk about colonialism and its effect, we realize about racial differences, right? The effect is what? The racial differences and economic dependence. Then we had a discussion on the conclusion that how late 19th and early 20th century, nearly 90% of the world was under colonial rule. However, following World War II, colonial power weakened. So, and movement for independence gained momentum. So, today we will start with what? The second part of the topic, post-colonialism, which is called as a movements theories. When we talk about movements theories, where we discussed that how throughout history, various movements and theories that have emerged. Emergence come out. So come out in response to what? Colonial rule. Because of the colonial rule, what happened? You would find out movements and theories have come out, isn't it? So, and these movements do what or wanted what? These movements wanted to challenge the power of empires, right? So, and they demand what? Freedom. So, and they also reclaim cultural identity, isn't it? So, and if you talk about that, there are three key figures in this particular movement theories. Who are those three key figures? You would find out one is called as Mahatma Gandhi, right? Who took the mainstream in India's freedom. Second is called as Aimé Césaire. Aimé Césaire, Almecesaire, Aimé Césaire. And third one is called as Frantz Fanon, F-R-A-N-T-Z, Frantz Fanon, F-A-N-O-N. So these are the three key figures who played important roles in shaping resistance to colonialism. So, and each of them had a unique approach to, opposing imperial rule. Opposing imperial rule. Imperial rule means colonization, imperial rule. From non-violent resistance to cultural revival and psychological analysis. So, what you find out? Non-violent resistance to cultural development, revival, and psychological description or analysis. Now, let's come to the first one, who is called as Mahatma Gandhi. So, Gandhi's Satyagraha. If you talk about Gandhi's Satyagraha, we know that the power of non-violence, isn't it? So, Mahatma Gandhi's approach, I have given you the link, right? In that link, you would find out. So, you would find out that the power of non-violence, Gandhi's Satyagraha, the power of non-violence, Mahatma Gandhi's approach to fighting British colonial rule in India was unique, and that stood apart from other anti-colonial movements worldwide. So, if you talk about that, Mahatma Gandhi is not unique. His follow or his approach to fighting with the British Empire, British colonial, was something called as a unique and stood separate from other anti-colonial movements worldwide. His method known as nothing but a satyagraha. When we talk about satyagraha, that was rooted in a non-violence. Non-violence, or you can consider it's called as a non-violence, it's called ahimsa. Right. So truth, satya, and passive resistance. So when you talk about ahimsa, satya, and passive resistance, so Gandhi believed that what true resistance did not require weapons or aggressions. Then what it requires, rather moral strength and personal disciplines. If you want to do the resistance, true resistance, then what you need nothing but the moral strength and personal discipline. You don't need weapons, you don't need armors, all such kind of things, and you don't need also non-violence, violence, so or aggression. The main principle of Mahatma Gandhi was what in Satyagraha that called it the passive resistance. When we talk about passive resistance, what do you mean by that? It means Gandhi encouraged people to say no to any kind of a support. When you say that refuse cooperation, it means you are not going to support the British. Any kind of a rule British has made, or any kind of a need or necessity that British people require. So in which Indian people will not help. Isn't it? That is called as a passive resistance, such as boycotting British goods and institutions. Isn't it? So boycott what? British goods. British goods means British clothes. So British nurtured or British manufactured products will not be used. And in the institutions like police station, courts, and educational institutions and industries where people will not go. Isn't it? That means what? That means called as you are refuse cooperation. You are to refuse cooperation. That is called as passive resistance. The second one is called as a personal discipline. When we talk about personal discipline, we understand that Mahatma Gandhi emphasized self-control. You need to control yourself. So, and you need to maintain loyalty, honesty, and ethical, legal living. Ethical means what? Something which is based on the principles. So, ethical living as a tool for resistance. So, if you go with the self-control, honesty, and the principle living as tools for resistance, then that is known as a personal discipline. Got the point? So, passive resistance, personal discipline. Third is called as a Swaraj. When we talk about Swaraj means what? So rule, self-rule. Swaraj means what? So rule, so self-rule. When we say that Swaraj or self-rule, Gandhi believed that what India should be governed by its own people and not by foreign rulers. Isn't it? That is what the thought. And this idea was not just political but also personal. He supported or he encouraged individuals to take responsibility for their own lives and actions. Right. So in that case, we talk about passive resistance, personal discipline, Swaraj, right? And the fourth one is called as an anti-industrial stance. Anti-industrial stance, which means what? He opposed large-scale industrialization. Isn't it? Large-scale industrialization means you cut the forest and you build the industries. So which he actually opposed, believing it led to exploitation and inequality. So what do you mean by exploitation and inequality? Exploitation to the animals and nature. And inequality means what? That the same kind of equality will not with the man, with the nature. Isn't it? Instead, he promoted what? Local handicrafts and self-sufficient village. So local means handicrafts and self-sufficient villages. So that is known as an anti-industrial stance. Then the fifth one is called as a cultural revival. When we talk about cultural revival, we understand Gandhi supported whom? The use of local languages. Right? Cultural revival, where you talk about what? Language, where you talk about customs, where you talk about tradition. So Gandhi supported the use of local languages, customs, and tradition because those are nothing but the way to stop British cultural dominance. So when the British spread their culture, their tradition, their custom, so which has to stop. And how you can stop it? When you follow your Indian tradition, your Indian culture, languages, customs, isn't it? So these are the nothing but called as a key principles of Satyagraha: passive resistance, personal discipline, Swaraj, self-rule, anti-industrial resistance or stance, cultural revival. These are nothing but called as a key principle. Now, the next is called as the challenges of Gandhi's approach. Now, when somebody who guided or under whose guidance Indian people follows, so such kind of rules, when such kind of key principles, when spread around the country, so that will definitely create a challenge. Create a challenge for whom? Mahatma Gandhi as well as Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha. Right. So challenges of Gandhi's approach, while Satyagraha inspired millions, it also had limitation. So million of people who followed with the Gandhiji's path, Satyagraha path, isn't it? And but at the same time, it also had limitation. Limitation means you can't do whatever you wish to. Right. So Gandhi emphasizes on Hindu tradition and religious value. Sometimes alienated minorities. Alienated minorities means that something called as you are not associate with the minor people. So particularly Muslims, that leads to division within the independence movement, isn't it? So his philosophy, though morally strong, was not always practical and in situation where violent suppression by the British was extreme. So obviously you can point out a person whose thought on Satyagraha was morally strong, right? But it was not always practical. You found out that what uh, some people who follow with the Mahatma Gandhi's principle, but there are many who follow with the Subhash Bose ethics and Subhash Bose principle. So in that case, you find out that all were not practical. All were not practical. In situation where violence, suppression by the British was extreme. So you would find out when Mahatma Gandhi followed that the key principles that you need to follow with the what? Personal discipline. At the same time, you will not raise your hand or you will not show the violence, aggression. You will not show, but others will show. Others means Britishers will show. And that's what happened. So you would find out that Britishers were extreme here. Right. So nonetheless, Gandhiji's legacy as a leader of non-violent resistance continues to inspire movement for justice worldwide. So anyhow, he spreads the kind of a message that was, or that generally followed by the people, and people follow in the worldwide. Right. Now the next you would find out who is called as a Aimé Césaire. Aimé Césaire Negritude. Aimé Césaire Negritude. Now who is he or she. So you can talk about that. He is nothing but a writer. He is nothing but a political leader. Political leader from whom? Political leader from Martinique. Martin Martinique. So, like you can talk about what? Reclaiming African identity. So, who is Aimé Césaire Negritude? He is none other than showing the African identity. So, Aimé Césaire, a writer and a political leader from Martinique, so who introduced the concept of what? Negritude. So, what is that negritude? Negritude was nothing but a cultural movement. It was a cultural movement. And what is the aim of this cultural movement? The aim of this cultural movement is restoring pride. Restoring pride. Pride, you understand? So, pride of a man, right? Pride of a man in African heritage. African heritage means what? Now, when you talk about you live in India, right? You know, you have the Indian culture. You have also Indian custom. Isn't it similar to that in Africa? African heritage. African means what you can say that history, African custom, African culture, African language. So, and the lifestyle of African people. So that shall not be, so what you can say that decimated or dismayed, right? So that is what it is stated. Means negritude was a cultural movement, and that aimed at restoring pride means to get back the pride of human being of Africa, isn't it? In African heritage. This movement was a direct response to the what? This movement, which movement? Negritude. Negritude movement was nothing but a direct response to the racism. Racism means black and white color and cultural erasure caused by colonialism. So, because of the Britishers who ruled the place called Africa or a country called Africa, so how do they means destroy the country Africa? It has been destroyed. Their culture, the people of the culture of that Africa, and also racism, right? So it is not a racism when we say that you would create a kind of a disruption between the white and black. If you have read the kind of a literature chapter called as A Long Walk to Freedom, written by Nelson Mandela, right? So what did he write in that particular story? He mentioned that how black and white, both two means two colors of people live together in that. One is called as a black, one is called as a white. But at the same time, you would find out that means in South Africa, what happened? When the colonials rule, no. So what they started means a disruption between the white and black, right? And for which what happened? White rich class people, so they kicked the black people as their slave. Not obviously, you would find out that the rulers, who are the rulers? White people are the rulers, isn't it? So in India, you would find out the kings are not rich. Are they rich or not? So, but what happened? Britishers also meant to occupy the territory, so make those kings and their empire under the control of theirs, and whatever Britishers want or wish. So that's what the kings have done, isn't it? So therefore, here what we are talking about, which was a cultural movement at restoring pride in African heritage. And this movement was a direct response to the racism and cultural erasure caused by colonialism. Now, the question comes out, what is negritude? When we talk about negritude, we understood it is a cultural movement, isn't it? So, it is stated that negritude was a celebration of African identity. Negritude was what? African identity. African celebration of African identity, celebration of African culture and tradition that colonial rulers had attempted to stop, suppress, right? So second is called the means these colonials tried to do what? Rejected the idea of European superiority. It rejected the idea of European superiority and instead promoted the beauty and uniqueness of African heritage. It means, what is that? Negritude. What negritude did? Negritude was a celebration of African identity. Negritude was rejected the idea of European superiority and promoted nothing but the beauty and uniqueness of African heritage. Third is called as the movement was influenced by the Harlem Renaissance. Harlem Renaissance, a cultural revival among African Americans in the United States. So African Americans in the United States. So that's what is called the negritude. All have gone? All have gone? So the next one is called as a. So these are the three things that you that describe negritude. What negritude is all about? It's nothing but simply helping to the or simply called as the heritage of Africa, isn't it? So the next one, when we talk about Aimé Césaire negritude or Césaire's critique of colonialism, when you talk about critique, what is that critique? The word critique means lots of ideas, right? Lots of ideas that have been celebrated. So your critique of Césaire's critique of colonialism is called as a Césaire, who have made different critiques or viewpoints. Viewpoints on whom? Viewpoints on colonialism. It's called as the belief on rulers or called as the Britishers. So here Césaire argued that what? Colonialism was not a civilizing mission, right? So as European rulers claim, but rather a form of what? Exploitation, isn't it? Now what is Césaire's argue about colonialism? That colonialism means is nothing but a form of exploitation. Exploitation means torture. Exploitation. Colonizers, he said, were not able to or not noble figures bringing progress. Colonizers, he said, what? Were not noble figures bringing progress. So colonizers did not bring any kind of development to the African country. They were adventurers. Who were adventurers? Colonizers, right? They were merchants, businessmen. They were opportunistics, right? So who wanted only profit. So European capitalism, in his view, had destroyed native community center, so socialist cultures, and replaced them with what? Economic system that benefited only the colonizers. Now, what happened when you talk about means Césaire? Césaire's viewpoint is what? His experience that he found out from the European means rulers. So he stated that what? Now, these means the Britishers or colonizers were nothing but what? Enjoyed to move different countries. Second, they were the businessmen. They were opportunistics. And they were nothing but having the idea of what? Destroying the local community, right? So, and their thought is nothing but to spread their own ideology, isn't it? That is what, and replace them with economic system, and their only thought is nothing but called as a getting benefit from the other country. So by spreading such messages, so negritude create an impact. Negritude, Césaire makes an impact on whom? African people. So, but what happened? That whether that create an impact on negritude or not, or impact of negritude or not, as we know that negritude was not just a cultural movement. Negritude influenced a political activism. Political activism means what? Political parties. So they also get involved in the negritude. So negritude inspired African nations to fight for independence and reject European imposed ways of thinking. Césaire's ideas were shared by whom? Leopold Senghor. Now, who is Leopold Senghor? Now, Leopold Senghor, who became the first president of Senegal, and who promoted African unity. Right. So Césaire and Senghor both were nothing but said the ideas through the movement called negritude. Now let's come to the next one, whose name is called as Frantz Fanon's, right? Frantz Fanon's psychoanalytic theory of colonialism. Psychoanalytic theory of colonialism. So we understood about Mahatma Gandhi Satyagraha. We talk about Césaire, right? Negritude. Now third is called as the Frantz Fanon. So Frantz Fanon's psychoanalytic theory. So psychoanalytic theory of colonialism. When you talk about Frantz Fanon, who is Frantz Fanon? A psychiatrist, right? So psychiatrist means what? Who generally treat the person who have a mental disorder, isn't it? So a psychiatrist and also philosopher from Martinique. So who explored how colonialism affects the psychology of both the colonized and the colonizer. Definitely, isn't it? Now think of it. When somebody who ruled and somebody who is being ruled, right? Somebody who ruled and somebody who is being ruled. So both are in mental trauma. Both are in mental trauma. Now, in that case, what kind of a mental trauma? That called as one who always have a desire that what now people will work under me, people's property will be mine. So, and I will occupy the land, geographical territory. Whereas the other who is being ruled want to, escape from the ruler, escape from the ruler. So therefore, when we talk about that, means colonialism affects the psychology of both the colonized and the colonizer. So his work focused on how colonial rule damaged the self-identity of native people. Now, whose work? Now we are talking about Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon's work. Frantz Fanon's work. What kind of a work? A psychoanalytic theory. So that work focused on how colonial rule damage or destroy the self-identity. Self-identity of whom? Now, those of the local people who live together, right or not? And how they could reclaim their dignity. So, because of the kind of a movement, so Frantz Fanon's main thought is to nothing but to get back people's dignity. When you call that people's dignity, it means we are talking about people's self-esteem, respect, isn't it? Now, we understand that how colonialism affects identity. We need to understand if the writer stated that he involved in the psychoanalytical theory to get back the dignity of the local people. Now the question comes out how the people's dignity get affected by the colonial roots or colonialism, isn't it? Now when we say that, Fanon argued that when colonizers constantly portray the native people as inferior. What do you mean by inferior? That's something called as a lower, right or not? So they don't have the self-esteem. They are nothing but called as a lower, isn't it? So not only the inferior, but also you can say that uncivilized and primitive. Uncivilized means uncultured, and primitive means called as a low in category. So the native people, the local people start to believe that also. What colonizers means treated, you also feel the same, isn't it? That's what is the psychology, the way you feel yourself, you behave also same way, isn't it? So that's what, over time, they internalize this resist. So over time, what happened? They internalize. Internalize means in their inner side, these resist ideas and begin to see themselves through the eyes of their operations. Operations means who get tortured. So whatever the torture, the way they see to the people also see themselves in the same manner, isn't it? So now, if you look into the next one, what do you find out? There are 3 stages of national consciousness, according to Fanon. What are they? One is called the imitation. The second one is called the realization. And the third one is rebellion, right? So when you say imitation, what do you mean by imitation? Copy. Imitation means copy. So the colonizers try to adapt to the culture of their rulers, right? the colonized try to adopt the culture of their rulers. It means the way Britishers enjoy their time. So similar to that, the same culture, the ruler means that called as the people who get ruled. So they also adapt. Adopt means they acquire, isn't it? And hoping to be accepted as equals, isn't it? Second is that is why it is known as an imitation. Second one is called as a realization. So what do you mean by realization? They recognize that no matter how much they copy the colonizer, they will never be treated equally, isn't it? Because Britishers are Britishers, Africans are African, right? Indians are Indians, isn't it? Now, obviously, you have a child, and you adopt a child. Do you treat both of in the same manner? No, you can't, right or not? Because you have a thought in your mind that she is or he is my biological, and this one is my adopted one. So you will not equally see both. Similar to that, you may carry the quality of the Britishers. You may carry the quality of the culture of the Britishers, but Britishers will not keep you in their level, isn't it? So that's what it is stated. They recognize that no matter how much they imitate the colonizer, they will never be treated equally. Third, it's called as a rebellion. When we say that rebellion is called as a war. That's called as a proclaiming war or declaring war. So rebellion, they reject the colonizer's culture. Who? These people who are being ruled. So they reject the colonizer's culture and fight for their own national identity and independence. Isn't it? That is what finally happened. Imitation, then after realization, then rebellion. Then you would find out Fanon's solution here. So, to break free from this psychological operation, psychological torture, Fanon requested colonized people to reclaim their history, reclaim their culture, reclaim their identity. He believed that true freedom could only come when the oppressed created their own narrative, own story, rather than accepting the what distorted version of history imposed by colonizers. So, in extreme cases, what happened? Fanon suggested that violence might be necessary to overthrow colonial rule. So Gandhiji stated what we don't need violence. But Fanon said that what in extreme case, violence might be necessary to overthrow this colonial rule, as seen in the Algerian War. And the example is called as the Algerian War that held for independence, isn't it? So finally, we come to that each of these thinkers, who are these thinkers? Gandhi, right? Fanon and Césaire. Gandhi, Césaire, and Fanon. So Fanon, who offered different strategies for stopping colonialism. Right? Gandhi has the Satyagraha, so relied on non-violent resistance, moral discipline, and self-rule. So Césaire's negritude focused on what cultural revival, rejecting European imposed identities, and Fanon's psychoanalytic theory, right? That explained how colonialism damaged native psychology and called for a strong national what consciousness. Even if needs, then go for the violence, right? So their ideas continue to influence what anti-colonial movements, independent struggles, and discussions on what that called as racial and cultural identity. Got understood? We have a third one, which is called as a post-colonial thinker. That we will discuss in the next things. Post-colonial thinkers and also Baba mimicry. So the third part is called as Baba mimicry. कुछ लेते क्यों नहीं